Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. We're going to hear evidence today from further people who were involved on behalf of the British Board of Agrément. Today's witness is first witness today, Mr. Nkomo, and my first step is to see whether he's there and can see me and hear me clearly. Are you there, Mr. Nkomo?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Good morning. Well, Mr. Nkomo, I'm here together with my fellow panel members, Ms. Thuria Istefan and Mr. Ali Akbar.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Now, you've already confirmed that you can see me and hear me clearly. I think you would like to make the oath, is that right?
Yes.
And you should have the words of the oath on the screen in front of you. You do?
Yes, I do.
And do you have a copy of the New Testament with you?
Yes.
Could you take the testament in your right hand, please, and read the words on the screen?
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Now, there are one or two things we need to deal with before we start taking your evidence. First of all, can you confirm that you're alone in the room from which you're giving evidence?
Yes, I can confirm that.
Thank you very much. Can you confirm that you have no documents or other materials with you?
That's correct.
Thank you. And finally, can you confirm that your mobile phone is in another room and that you don't have any other electronic device with you which is capable of receiving messages?
That's correct.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. I hope we shall not have problems with sound or vision, but if we do, we'll probably take a short break while the technical support people sort them out. So we'll see how we get on. We're planning to have a short break partway through the morning and another one this afternoon. It'll probably come around 11:15. But if you feel that you need a break at any time, in addition, will you just indicate that and we'll do our best to accommodate you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good. Is there anything you'd like to raise with me or any questions you have before you begin?
No, I don't have. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Well, now I'm going to invite Ms. Hines to put some questions to you. When you're ready, Ms. Hines.
Good morning. I am. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Good morning, and good morning to members of the panel. Good morning, Mr. Nkomo. Can you hear me and can you see me?
Yes, I can.
Good. Thank you for attending this public inquiry to give your evidence. We're very grateful to you. If you have any difficulties in understanding my questions, or if you need me to repeat a question, please do just let me know. Also, can I please ask you to keep your voice up so the transcriber so that she can hear you, and so that she can record all of your answers. Please don't nod or shake your head. Please answer yes or no. Is that all right?
That's fine, yes.
Can we go to your witness statement, which is BBA 3010783. This was made on the 30th of December 2019. And can we go to page 24, please? Do you see there at the bottom that there's a statement of truth?
Yes.
Can you confirm that that's your signature under it?
It is, yes.
Have you read this statement recently?
Yes.
Can you confirm that the contents of this statement are true?
Yes, they are, except one thing that I sent to our solicitors. I think one of the days I quoted was a 2017 date, which should have been a 2014 date.
Do you remember approximately which paragraph that would be in?
I can't quite remember. It's earlier in the statement itself.
Which review would that have been, or which episode would that have been related to?
The S153.
Give me a moment. I'll see if I can turn that up. We'll come back to that, and we'll let you clarify that.
Okay.
Have you discussed your statement or your evidence with anybody here today?
No.
When you were working at the BBA, there was an entity known as Alcoa that later became Arconic. And today I'm going to refer to that entity as Arconic. Do you know who I mean?
Yes, I do.
And today I'll be mostly talking about Arconic's BBA certificate for Rainabond architecture wall cladding, which was first issued on the 14th of January 2008. Can we go to that briefly at BBA 6047? I just wanted to show you this certificate so we're both clear on which one I mean. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Can we go back to your witness statement, please? BBA 30100783 at page 2. At paragraph 4, you say, I graduated with a degree in civil engineering in 1998 and have worked for consulting engineering firms as a design engineer between 1999 and 2009. And then you set out a number of tasks that you did in that role. Now, I understand from that you worked for around 10 years as a design engineer. Is that right?
Correct.
And that was specifically as a civil engineer?
A civil structural engineer.
Structural engineer.
Yep.
Can you tell us who you worked for?
I started off with a company in Botswana called MT and Associates Consulting Engineers. And then I moved on to Dublin in Ireland, and I worked for a company called Niall Fitzsimons Consulting Engineers. And then I moved on to another consultancy in Ireland as well. That was called ACS Consulting Engineers.
I see. In your career as a design engineer, did you do any overcladding projects?
No.
So you weren't directly involved in any design of any facade or cladding structure?
No.
Now, if we return to, we're still on your witness statement, at paragraph 5, you tell us that you became a chartered engineer. What did you do to attain that title?
I had to submit a report basically of my experience and qualifications. And following that, I had to do an interview where I was questioned on my experience and the work that I had carried out to be ascertained whether I met the requirements to be confirmed as a chartered engineer.
I see. And you joined the BBA in November 2010, is that right?
Correct.
Did you have, prior to joining the BBA, did you have any training on cladding or cladding products?
No.
So you've joined the BBA from the 1st of November, and that was in the role of project manager, is that right?
Correct.
And what division or section were you in?
In the engineering department.
And did you at that time report to a team manager?
When I reported to the head of approvals, there were no team managers at the time.
And who was that?
That was Brian Chamberlain.
I see. And in that role, did you assess products for new certification and review existing certificates?
It was both.
Both. And in that role, were you looking at cladding products?
Cladding, yes, as well. I started looking into cladding.
That was when you started working in cladding. Did you look at other products as well?
Yes, I did.
I see. What proportion of products were cladding products?
I can't remember what it was.
Now, you tell us in your witness statement, I don't think we need to go back to it, but you tell us that as a project manager for those years, you were not involved in the review of the Rainabond certificate in 2011. Is that right?
As far as I recall, that's correct, yes.
That was done by another project manager, Alfio Melotta. Is that right?
Correct.
Would you have expected to have known what he was doing on that review?
I might have, but I don't remember because he was my mentor at the time. So
I see.
Yeah. I can't remember whether he discussed the review with me or not. I wouldn't remember that. Was
that an official mentor or was that an ad hoc sort of process?
It was official. He was assigned to help me settle into the BBA when I joined.
I see. And what sorts of things would you go to your mentor about?
Basically on how, because obviously I was new to the job, in terms of learning how to do the job, learning how to assess products, learning how to do reviews.
So it was mostly do I understand correctly, it was mostly learning the procedures and processes of the BBA?
And not only procedures and processes, but also from a technical point.
I see. So you would learn from Mr. Malota about
yes, among others, yes.
I see. And from, I think, around the 5th of January, you became a team manager. Is that right?
Correct.
Was that a promotion?
Yes, it was. Yes, the position became available. I applied and I got it.
And you said at the time you started, there weren't any team managers. Was this a role that was created?
Yes.
Can you tell us why it was created?
The BBA was growing at the time, and what the company wanted to do is to group products into teams. So there's one team that focuses on certain product areas and other teams focusing on others.
I see. Well, Ms. Amoroso's told us about a cladding team. Is it right? Have I surmised correctly that your team was the cladding team?
Correct.
So when you became team manager, was that when the cladding team was formed, or was there a cladding team previously?
It wasn't called cladding. There was a team, so everyone who worked in cladding was under that team. So when I became team manager, then cladding as a product area was separated from the other team that was covering cladding and building systems.
And just so I'm clear, that happened in early January 2015?
When I became team manager, yes.
I see. And am I right that there was effectively an interstitial layer of management inserted into the management structure that you became when you became team manager?
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Yes. So there was a new layer of management inserted into the structure, the management structure, and you took up that management role.
The layer was already there, the structure of team managers. It's just that one team was separated into two.
I see. Well, I'm glad I clarified that because I hadn't quite understood. So thank you. Did you, as team manager, did you still report to Brian Chamberlain?
Yes.
I see. And did Miss Valentina Amoroso report to you in the new cladding team?
That's correct.
I see. Does that mean that the focus of your team was on cladding exclusively?
Not exclusively. There were other products that we were covering as well.
I see. Were they related products or just other miscellaneous products?
Building systems and other wall-related products.
I see.
Yes.
And from the 1st of October 2016, you took on the role of technical expert. Is that right?
Correct.
And you held that role at the same time as being team manager.
Yes.
Is that right? Yes. And do I understand correctly that your expertise was external wall cladding?
Correct.
Did the BBA always have an external wall cladding expert?
I believe I was the first one in terms of the title, because those titles were not there before, but there were people who were experienced in cladding even more than myself previously to that.
I say. And you say there were people experienced in cladding even more than yourself. Would you say, and you may not be able to comment, would you say that there was people with cladding experience in your time when you were project manager?
Yes.
And would you be able to comment about before then? So when you came to the BBA, there was people perhaps from as early as 2007, 2008 who'd been there who were cladding, who were very experienced in cladding?
I don't know before I joined, but after I joined, there were people who were very experienced in cladding.
And when you were project manager, who would you go to for questions about cladding?
It was either, as I said, Alfeo Mlota, or there was Kari Randa, who was, I think, one of the most senior in cladding. And there was another gentleman as well called Zoltan. And I would go to Brian Chamberlain as well.
And Brian Chamberlain, and that's Carrie Randall who went to UCAS eventually, is that right?
Correct, yes.
I see. Excuse me. Now, I've understood that from March 2019, you stopped being team manager. Is that right?
Correct.
And you focused exclusively on your technical expert role. Have I got that right?
Correct.
And you're still employed at the BBA in that role?
I am, yes.
Can we go to your statement at page 2? That's BBA 30100783. At paragraph 6. Paragraph 6, please. Can you look at the last sentence there, 4 lines from the bottom? In my role, I'm responsible for providing technical guidance and support to project managers, mentoring, checking and authorizing assessment contracts, checking and authorizing assessment work, and draft certificates. Mr. Nkomo, is that a description of your role as technical expert, or is that of another role?
That's part of my description, yes, as a technical expert, correct.
I see. Staying with your witness statement, can we go to page 24, please? And you'll see that in bold, there's a question number 32, and it says, has your understanding of fire performance testing, certification, or compliance with relevant regulations and guidance changed since the issue of certificate in 2008? If so, please explain in what ways it has changed and why. And you say paragraph 98. Note, I am still with the BBA. And at paragraph 99, I just want to look at that first line. My understanding of fire has not changed. Do you mean by that since the beginning of your time at the BBA, you had a good understanding of reaction to fire testing of products?
I wouldn't call it good, because there is a technical excellence team at the BBA that generally handles fire-related matters. So I wouldn't say I'm good in fire myself. I see.
But did you have a, shall I say, working knowledge of
a general idea of fire-related matters?
I see. Would you have understood, and do you understand, the difference between the 2 regimes, the BS 476 suite of tests, 2 of which can lead to the designation class 0, and the European tests that lead to the EN 13501 classification? Is that something you would appreciate?
No.
I see. Do we take from your statement that from the beginning of your time at the BBA, you had a good knowledge of approved document B on fire safety?
I wouldn't say good knowledge, it's general knowledge, as I said.
I see. Do you have a general knowledge about the necessary fire performance of materials before they can be used on different parts of buildings?
In general terms, as far as the reaction to fire itself and what it might mean in terms of any possible, any applicable restrictions.
I see. At the BBA, have you had any training on reaction to fire testing?
We've been given, yes, over time, in-house seminars have taken place by the technical excellence team. I
see. Can you give us an approximate time frame of when you might have had those?
I can't quite recall. There have been a few of them over my 10 years at BBA. I can't remember exactly.
I see. Were these seminars mandatory?
An invitation will be sent out to say there is this seminar and you would register to attend. I don't know whether they were mandatory or not.
I see.
Yeah.
Did you have any training or guidance on approved document B on fire safety?
I think some of the training, the in-house training, was in relation to approved document.
In relation to approved document B specifically?
Yeah, correct.
I see. When you started at the BBA, would you have had any training on the approved documents?
After I joined the BBA or before?
Well, when you started, as part of your initial days at the BBA?
No.
I see. Valentina Amoroso told us yesterday that she spent some time reading them and asking questions. Was it a similar sort of process for you?
I can't quite say. When you join, there's an induction program, generally that's set up, and that's not going into the specific technical details of various topics. It's more of settling into the organization. And then as you start the work, then it's kind of, you learn as you do the work, with either asking colleagues or if there are any internal seminars like the ones I mentioned that are held by the BBA.
I see. Did you ever have occasion to ask for advice or assistance on fire matters from external bodies like the BRE or Warrington, who you may know as Exover?
In personal myself?
Yes.
And not directly. I have in other projects where there is a system that's set up that if we had any fire-related queries, we would complete a form, then that's sent to Warrington by way of an individual who is the contact person here at the BBA.
So specifically Warrington, who in Warrington would you ask? Do you know?
I don't know, because it wasn't going directly from me. You had to go through, there's a BBA project manager that we used to go through.
I see. What sort of period was this?
I can't quite remember the period.
Was it when you were a project manager or when you were a team manager?
I can't quite remember for sure. It could have either.
Was it on routine questions, or was it on just when the project manager would come across a problem, a difficult question, that you would go to Warrington?
Yeah, it would have been on difficult questions that come up with things that were not clear.
I see. So am I right that just as a day-to-day, you wouldn't go and check any statements about fire performance just routinely? It would just be if something exceptional or difficult came up. Is that right?
You mean go and check externally?
Yes, check externally, yes.
No, generally, if it's routine questions, you'll check internally first, either with individuals within the company who are more experienced with fire matters, or the technical excellence team, which handles such matters mainly.
So tell me a little bit more about the internal process. Who in the BBA would be the fire person to go to in your time as project manager or team manager?
I think there is a John Denya and John Alban, who are in the technical excellence team.
I see. This technical excellence team, has that always existed, or is that a more recent?
No, I can't remember exactly when, but I think it would have come into place in the last few years.
In the last few years. So in the time you were, say, project manager, there wasn't perhaps a technical excellence team, but am I right that there would have been someone to ask about fire?
Yes, those two individuals were still within the company. People would go and ask those individuals.
I see. And would it be routine to always check fire performance statements in a certificate with John Denya or John Alban?
It wasn't always routine.
When would you go to John Denya or John Alban?
At the moment is we do go to them quite a lot, but in times gone by, normally you would follow the wording that was there for any reaction to fire that any product achieved.
I see. So you wouldn't necessarily go to John Denya or John Alban in times gone by. And can I take that as being between 2010 and say 2015? Would that be fair?
Not quite, as I said. I mean, unless it was a general question, normally project managers will either ask one another or, the head of approvals, who was Brian Chamberlain at the time, you would ask him, because at the end of the day, he would go through your your technical file once we have finished the job in order to give comments on that.
I see. What I'm getting at is, was it a necessary step in the process to check fire statements with any one of these people, John Denyer, John Alban, or Brian Chamberlain? Or was it something that came up from time to time if the project manager felt he or she needed to ask?
It wasn't a necessary step in terms of during the assessment, but once you have completed the assessment itself and you have drafted your certificate and prepared your evaluation report, which contains basically in detail what you have done under that work, then those two documents will then be passed on to Brian Chamberlain, who will then check. So if it wasn't directly to John Alban or John Denyer, it will go through Brian Chamberlain at the end.
There wasn't really a process by which, say you're assessing a new product and you write your statements. I think you said you might take statements from a previous certificate. There wasn't a process by which you would take the written document, the written certificate, alongside the test data to Mr. Chamberlain or Mr. Alban. Mr. Chamberlain would just get the final certificate and look at that. Is that right?
Yes, it's correct. Yeah.
I understand. I just want to ask one more question about the arrangement with Warrington. Did the BBA pay Warrington a fee to answer questions about fire?
I don't know that detail.
I understand. Can you help us with another matter that came up from Ms. Amoroso's evidence? She said yesterday that she would have expected the CSTB to notify her if there'd been changes to certified products. And she talked about a mutual agreement between the BBA and the CSTB. Was there any, to your knowledge, was there any mutual agreement between the BBA and the CSTB about the sharing of information relevant, for example, to the Rainabond product?
I don't know if there was a contractual agreement. There is basically an appreciation that notified bodies can depend on the work that was done by another body for their own certification. So in terms of contractual basis, I don't know.
What I'm asking about is if there was an ongoing agreement that, say we've taken the CSTB data to do a confirmation certificate. Was there an agreement or an arrangement or even an understanding that the CSTB would continue to provide updates to that data to the BBA?
As far as I remember, I think we would have to specifically ask the CSTB.
I see.
For those details.
What about the sharing of information in relation to surveillance of the factory processes, which the CSTB was carrying out? We understand that they were happening or they were supposed to be happening from the issue of the certificate until around 2015, when the BBA set up their own surveillance. What would your expectations of the CSTB be then?
It would be for them to provide the BBA then with reports of those surveillance visits. Now the mechanism of that, I'm not sure how it actually worked in terms of who actually requested the reports to be sent on a regular basis.
I see. And would you, I think you may have somewhat answered the question, would you have expected those to be sent on a regular basis or by exception? So if something went wrong, you would get that report?
If they were requested, I would have expected them on a regular basis.
And I just want to clarify your evidence. What about test evidence data or data more generally? So for example, if the CSTB did additional testing on, say, the Rainabond product, would you expect them to notify the BBA about that additional testing and those results?
I don't know if there is such an arrangement we have with them.
I see. Was the CSTB ever made aware of the contents of the BBA certificate, to your knowledge?
I don't know.
And are you aware of any arrangement with the CSTB that's been formalized in writing?
other than the one when the certificate itself was originally assessed, the project manager who carried out that assessment, I know he did say to the CSTB to be able to notify the BBA of any major non-conformities that they were to pick up during their surveillance. That's as far as I know in terms of formal.
I see. And no other interbody contract or arrangement?
I'm not aware of that.
I see. I want to ask you some general questions about reviews and the review processes. And you've told us that as project manager, you would have conducted assessments for new products and reviews for existing products. Can you help me with how many certificates would you be working on at any one time?
I think it varies from project manager to project manager. I mean, I think once you have been at the BBA for at least 2 years or so, I think you generally find people with anything between 10 and 20 projects. Some of them may be new assessments, some of them may be reviews, some of them may be reissues of existing certificates.
I see. And beginners, perhaps new people, would have fewer?
Yes, correct.
I see. How many project managers reported to you when you were team manager?
Can't quite remember, but I think it would have been between 5 and 6 thereabout, I think.
I see. Can we please go to your witness statement at page 5, paragraph 12? And you set out the steps there for conducting a review. Can we zoom in on paragraph 12, please? You say, steps for conducting a review are as follows. A, requesting information from the certificate holder. B, reviewing the contents of the certificate to establish if the information in it is still up to date / relevant, e.g., if the version of standards, building regulations, etc. quoted have been updated since the certificate was last issued. C, reviewing the certificate holder's product literature to establish there are no contradictions with the contents of the certificate. D, reviewing the factory surveillance reports history for the previous 3 years to establish that any matters raised were addressed and confirming the QP, by which I think you mean quality plan, is up to date and agreed. E, completing a review checklist which details the findings of the process and preparing a review letter summarizing the key findings. The review checklist templates list the areas to be covered in the review. A review letter to the certificate holder would be prepared once the checklist is completed. And you tell us below that the sign-off process changed after you became the team manager. Can we now just go over the page to page 6 of your witness statement, paragraph 14. And you say there, once a project manager, PM, completes the review, they would pass the review checklist and letter to their team manager to check and sign off before the letter is sent to the certificate holder. Where the review identifies serious issues resulting in recommendation of limited validity, suspension, or withdrawal of certificate, the letter is approved and signed off by the operations manager. And just to get your evidence completely right, is that a description, those two paragraphs we've just looked at, of how you as team manager would have operated a review?
Generally, yes, though in 14, there will be a lot of discussions between a team manager and their project manager during the course of the work itself. And then at the end, then I would then go through the final report and the letter to comment and sign it off.
I see. In fact, I think we see that at page 12. Can we go to that paragraph 41? Certainly the end of that process, you say, as team manager, I managed the PM responsible for the review, oversaw the signing off of the review at the end of the work after checking it and the work. We say there that you checked the work. You mean by that you checked the project manager's work, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And You've told us about discussions with the project manager. Would that be part of your checking their work?
Not necessarily me going to them. It's a question of mainly if they have any questions or queries, they would come to myself for discussions.
So the project manager was to raise questions with you, and that is how you'd come to know of any issues or details that you should be aware of?
That's correct, yes. And also the other thing that we would have one-to-one meetings, the project managers, just to go through the list of jobs that they have, just to maintain progress and see if there were any issues.
I see. And in terms of checking, would you go over everything they did? Would you spot check? Would you focus on specific areas? Can you give us a feel for what you would do with these checks?
It's a combination of all that you have mentioned. Sometimes I would spot check. It depends on the contents of the review checklist itself. So you kind of get a feel as you work with different people. Some with the experience I had on certain aspects, if I read something and it rang a bell, sometimes I would think to say, oh, let me go and actually check the document behind that. Whereas if it's clearly laid out, I would read the report and leave it at that.
I see. So the review checklist was the key document in your checking work.
That's correct.
I see. Would you say you were not checking literally everything that the project manager was doing?
No, we are not required to check everything.
Of course. That would mean that you would be relying on the project manager to get everything right and be thorough. Is that right?
That's correct.
That would mean that you would rely on the BBA processes being robust and being able to get all of the right information out of the certificate holder. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that. As I said, also with the experience I would have on other aspects, sometimes I would just decide to spot check something specifically if something rings a bell.
I see. And when you had a new recruit to the BBA, would you check his or her or their work more thoroughly than someone with a lot of experience?
Generally, that's what I tend to do.
I see. Now I'd like to ask about the Reynabond certificate itself, and in particular, the review that was started in 2013. And for your reference, the project number is S153729. So we'll see that number coming up on documents. So you'll know that that's related to that project. Now, we can see on the documents that this review was commenced in October 2013 by Maria Barbato. And at the time, she would have been a project manager. Is that right?
Correct.
And I think I've got this right, that she was a person in your team at your level. Is that about right?
Yes.
You were both project managers at the same time.
That's correct.
Can we please go to BBA 408090? We're going to see the letter that Maria Barbato sent to Arconic, dated 8th of October 2013. In fact, it was sent the next day, but it's all around the same time. Can we now go to the second page, please, at the bottom of the page? And we see a header, submission of data. And it says this: it is necessary for the BBA to be supplied with the following information in order to carry out the review of your Agrément certificate 084510. 1. It is our normal practice to conduct a written survey of users of the product. Could you therefore please provide details of a minimum of 10 installers and 10 major users of stone-light cladding panels who can be contacted to establish the practicability of installation and performance in use. Going down to the second paragraph, written confirmation that there have been no changes in the design, specification, context of use, or other details that would invalidate the certificate. Alternatively, please specify any changes. Number 3, regarding factory production control, please supply full details of any changes to A, raw materials. Can we go over the page? B, the manufacturing process. C, quality control procedure. Paragraph 4, copies of your current UK technical literature and installation instructions relating to the product. 5, a list of customer complaints, if any, relating to the product quality for projects in the UK in the last 3 years and the action taken to resolve them. Paragraph 6, an estimate of the annual volume of production of the product for the UK market since the issue of the certificate. And paragraph 7, recent copies of typical production/quality control records for the manufacturer of the product. Mr. Nkomo, was that the standard form of the request at that time?
I'm not quite sure if it was the standard form. I think just looking at it, I think some of the information may be slightly different in other reviews. But in general, yes, that's the sort of information that would be asked.
Was this a template, or was this perhaps copied from another letter?
I'm not aware that we had a template, as it were. I think oftentimes what we would do is use the list that we had already compiled in other jobs. Like in this case, it's a review. So if you're doing another review, you would refer to probably the most recent review that you have done.
I see. Can we go up? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Nkomo.
Go ahead, please.
Sorry, I missed that. Oh, go ahead, I see. Can we just go up to the page before? Page 2, thank you. At the bottom in that paragraph 1, do you see on the second line that Maria Barbato's referenced stone-light cladding panels? That does not appear to be the product that was being reviewed at the time. Does that seem to be the case to you?
Yes, that was not the product.
So that's possibly a copy and paste error.
Yes, I think this, as I explained, we would normally go in terms of the information required, go to the list that we have compiled for another job. So it appears here that it was copied from another job, but the name of the product not changed.
I see. I'm not quite sure how to put this to you, Mr. Nkomo, but is that a little sloppy?
It's an editing error, clearly.
I see. Now, we know that Maria Barbato tried to contact Arconic, and we know by this letter dated the 8th of October, and we know because we saw yesterday the correspondence from Ms. Barbato to various people in Arconic that she chased on email on the 21st of October 2013, 29th of November 2019, 13th of December 2013, sorry if I've said 19, I mean 13, 10th of February 2014, 28th of February 2014, 7th of May 2014, and from time to time it appears that she was in contact with Claude Verla on the telephone. And she also managed to arrange a factory surveillance visit for the 10th of September, but we know she did not get the information she requested in her October letter 2013. And although you were project manager at the time, would you have known that there had been any difficulties in getting a response from Arconic while Maria Barbato was chasing them?
Unless she discussed it with me, I wouldn't have known.
I see. Do I understand that you don't have any independent recollection of that at the time?
No, I don't.
I see. And we know that Valentina Amoroso took over this review in December 2014. And that was, in fact, before you became team manager, wasn't it?
Correct.
And she was still quite new at the BBA at the time, wasn't she?
Yes.
Can we now go to BBA 3010550? This will be an email chain between you and Valentina Amoroso. And can we go to the very bottom of page 3? We see at the very bottom of the screen right now that there's an email from Valentina Amoroso on the 1st of December 2014. And if we scroll over to the page 4, we can see that it's to you. And the subject is info cladding panels. And she says, "Hi, Prayer. I'm working on one of Maria's jobs, and you've been advised as, quote, the expert, unquote, about cladding systems. I need to ask a couple of things. Can you tell me what is a suitable time for you?" Can we scroll back up to the middle of page 3, email dated 1st of December, timed at 14:32, thank you. We can see your reply. "Hi, Valentina. Don't believe everything you hear, Valentina, 4 exclamation marks. I'm no expert at all. I'd be interested to know who said I'm the expert. It's putting pressure on me because if I'm unable to answer your questions / help you, I'd feel embarrassed, ... You can come at 3 p.m. Now, did you have some expertise in cladding at this time?
I'd been at the BBA at that time for 4 years, I believe. So I did have some expertise in cladding, yes.
You had at least enough for someone in your team to be able to ask you about cladding. Is that something you can agree with?
Yes, I would say so. But obviously, I wouldn't class myself as an expert as it was, characterized in that email.
I see. And is it right, people would come to you with questions about cladding and you would help them if you could? Have I characterized that fairly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Can we continue with this chain and go to the bottom of page 2? There's an email timed 16:35. Thank you. And it says, it's from Valentina Amoroso. It's on the same day. And she says, "Hi, Prayer. This is the contact person for Alcoa Architectural Products SAS, job S1 53729. She gives the details for Claude Verla. And then she says at the bottom, "Sorry for leaving you in the position of contacting them. Sad face. Thank you very much. Cheers." Now, might we guess from that you did speak with Miss Amoroso at some time that afternoon?
I assume so, yes.
And it looks from this that you were asked to contact Claude Verla at Arconic. Is that right?
That's correct.
Were you being asked to intervene?
I can't quite remember what exactly it was in connection with.
I see. So you're not sure if you were told something about needing to intervene, that they needed to be perhaps someone more senior contacting Arconic, making that initial contact?
I can't quite tell from that email what exactly I was contacting them for.
Okay, well, perhaps the next document will help. But before we go there, did you know Arconic before this time? Had you worked on any other Arconic products, for example, Rainolux?
I don't recall having worked on any of their products up to that time. No, I don't recall.
I see. Can we please go to Claude Verla's exhibits, part 18, that's MET 30-53158_P18. And I'm going to go to page 4, please. And we can see there that there's an email from you. It's dated the 2nd of December 2014. And you say, "Dear Claude Verla, thank you for taking my call earlier this afternoon. I note the following issues we discussed." I'm going to skip the first paragraph and go straight to the second paragraph. You say, "Outstanding information for the review of BBA certificate 084510 under contract S1 53729. My colleague Maria Barbato has asked for the information a number of times. You indicated you provided information to the inspector who visited the factory and therefore did not respond to Maria's emails as you considered Maria's request addressed. Unfortunately, the information provided to the inspectors during the factory audits is different to the one required for the review of the certificate as requested by Maria. Thank you that you have agreed to send this information if we can send you the list again. My colleague Valentina Amoroso, who took over the review job S153729 after Maria left the BBA, will send you an email with a reminder of what information we require. This will enable her to complete the review of your certificate 084510. Now we see at the bottom that you've signed that off as project manager. So even though you were project manager, you were making this initial contact with Arconic. Is that right?
That's correct.
Could that be on the basis that you were more experienced?
I'm not, it might be, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can see that you refer to Maria Barbato as having asked for information a number of times. At this point, do you think you understood that there had been difficulties in contacting and getting information from Arconic?
In as far as the fact that Maria had asked for the information and she still multiple times, but hadn't received a response. That's how I understood it.
Well, you say multiple times. Did you have sight of the volume of requests that had been made?
Judging by the statement, that paragraph number 2, I think I would have had an idea that Maria had tried before. Because I think when Maria left, and at the time that Valentina was given the job, some questions were being directed at me in the interim period, just to help. So I imagine I would have had sight of the fact that Maria had been chasing them, but hadn't managed to get any information from them.
I see. Let me just understand that correctly. So Maria Barbato left, say, in October or November, and Valentina Amoroso joined the team in around November, December. I think her evidence was November. But you were sort of covering Maria's projects until Valentina picked them up. Have I understood that?
Not covering. I don't recall covering, but I think by default, either the team manager would direct people to me. In the meantime, I'd been at the BBA for 4 years, I imagine I had a little bit more knowledge than others at the time. But it wasn't an official, bridge before a new manager took over.
I see. And in that time, perhaps, is it your evidence that you became aware of the volume of correspondence that had passed?
And not in their entirety. The fact that Maria had chased them and hadn't gotten the information.
I see.
Yes.
Now, in that document, we saw you say the information provided to the inspectors during their factory audits is different to the one required for the review of the certificate as requested by Maria. And you can see that paragraph 2, 4 lines down, starting with unfortunately. Do you see that?
Yes.
By that, do you mean that the documents that have not been provided, the information that is missing, is that information that was in Maria Barbato's letter of the 8th of October 2013?
I think that's what I would have been implying from this.
Sorry, please carry on, Mr. Nkomo.
No, I think that's what I would have been implying, that the information is detailed in Maria's letter was still outstanding compared to what they had claimed they had given the inspector.
I see. And am I right that you would not expect an inspector to collect that sort of information on a surveillance visit?
That's correct.
And am I right that it was your view that the certificate holder had to send those documents to the BBA, that it was a necessary part of the review?
That's correct.
Can we please go to BBA 408098? And this is an email, excuse me, This is an email from Valentina Amoroso on the 2nd of December 2014. We can see that it's timed 1617, so it follows the email that we just saw. And we can see that it's written to Claude Verla. And she says, "My name is Valentina Amoroso, and I have been designated as the new project manager responsible for coordinating the review of your BBA certificate 084510. Following on from your conversation with my colleague, Nkomo, please find the list of information required to complete the review report. 1, details of a minimum of 10 major installers and 10 major users of Stonelight cladding panels in the UK, who can be contacted to establish the practicability of installation and performance in use." Going down now to the second paragraph, written confirmation that there have been no changes in the design, specification, context of use, or other details that would invalidate the certificate. Alternatively, please specify any changes. Paragraph 3, regarding factory production control, please supply full details of any changes to A, raw materials, B, manufacturing process, C, quality control procedure. And we see 4, 5, 6, and 7 thereunder. That I think is very similar to the letter that Maria Barbato wrote some 14 months previously. Is that right?
It looks similar, yes.
In fact, we can see in paragraph 1, the Stonelight cladding panels has been cited again. So that looks like perhaps another copy and paste error. Is that your understanding?
I wouldn't say a copy and paste error because the letter had already gone out first from Maria. So what Valentina was doing effectively was resending the letter that contained the information. I wouldn't have expected her to proofread unless someone had known that there was an error in the wording.
I see. Did it strike you as unusual to have to send out more or less the same letter to Arconic?
No, it didn't, because I think from my understanding at the time, the information hadn't been provided. So we were reminding them of what Maria had asked them, which they hadn't sent.
Sorry, please continue.
No, I'm saying it would have been, I would have expected us to resend the exact letter to remind them of the information.
Yes. Yes, what I'm asking really is, was it unusual to have to resend a letter to a certificate holder, setting out once again everything that you asked for 14 months earlier?
If you're talking in terms of the time frame, the 14 months, perhaps it may have been unusual. But if you are sending the exact letter, it wasn't unusual because we wanted them to know exactly what we had asked for before.
Was it common to have such a lack of engagement by a certificate holder during a review?
It wasn't normal.
It was not normal.
It wasn't. There will be delays in many jobs, but a delay of this length did appear quite long.
I see. Was that significant to you at the time?
I just took it as a delay, whether significant or not. I didn't think in those terms.
Okay. Can we look at paragraph 2 and paragraph 3? We can see that they're very different requests. It seems to me that paragraph 3 is focused on production and quality, whereas paragraph 2 is about making sure that nothing else has changed. Have I understood that distinction correctly?
Yes, that seems to be the case.
And it seems to me from your previous email to Claude Verla that getting information from paragraph 3 and information from paragraph 2 was not negotiable. Have I understood that right?
I wouldn't say not negotiable.
It was an essential part of the review.
All the information ultimately is essential to the review, because it all adds up to helping us come to a conclusion on the suitability of the product. So I wouldn't single that one out to say is the only one that was essential.
But it was one of the ones that was essential.
Yes.
And it was part of BBA process to have what's said there in paragraph 2, was it?
Yes, it would have been part of the process. As I said earlier, the list does look slightly different to others that I've seen on other jobs. But in general, yes, it is a list that would have been considered essential, among one of the essential aspects in terms of 2 and 3.
Now, we know that Valentina picked up the communication with Arconic at this point, and we know that she got a quality plan agreed with Arconic and that she set up BBA surveillance to start on a rolling basis from 2015. But what she still didn't have was that information that we're looking at in this letter of December 2014. And we heard yesterday, and we saw the documents of her attempts to get that information. On the 18th of December 2014, she wrote to Lilia Koskuk, 7th of January 2015, 12th of January 2015. Now, you're not copied on all of these emails, but would you have been aware of them at the time?
I don't recall, but it is possible if Valentina discussed some of the aspects with me that I would have been aware if she discussed with me.
I see. Do you recall if she discussed with you all of these emails or any of them?
I don't recall.
I see. Did you become aware of all of these attempts by Ms. Amoroso to contact Arconic at some later date?
I suspect I would have been aware at some point.
I see. Before the close of this review, you would have been aware of it?
I suspect so.
Can we please go to BBA 408079? Now at the top, we see an email dated 22nd of January 2015, timed 1609. It's from Valentina Amoroso to Lilia Koskuk. It's also to Claude Verla, but I noticed that that email is spelt wrongly, and to Celine Ernay of Alcoa. And it says this: "Hi Lilia, sorry for the late reply. Unfortunately, in the last year, we have experienced several problems in getting in touch with you and receive the required info to progress our job, this leading to severe delays in closing this review job. For this reason, BBA has decided to go ahead with the information already in hands. I drafted a copy of the review report and I am waiting for approval from my team manager. After that, you will receive it for your personal record." Now, just so I can understand the timing, you became team manager on the 5th of January 2015, so a few weeks before this, is that right?
Correct.
So you were newly in the position of team manager at the time of sending this email, is that right?
That's correct.
Were you aware personally of this email?
I don't recall. So I'm not copied there, but I don't recall if I was aware of it.
I see. Were you aware of a decision, as she puts it, to go ahead with the information already in hands?
I think I would have been aware of that, yes, because the report ultimately came to myself
I see.
for checking and signing off, yes.
Would Valentina Amoroso have had the authority to make that decision?
And not just Valentina. Generally, we would close the reviews if we were not receiving all the email. We wouldn't keep them open forever. You just finish it up, make conclusions with what information you have, and close the job. That was common practice.
I see. Well, we'll come back to that answer. I just want to know who was the decision maker, who would have had the authority to close the review with the information already in hand.
In this case, I would have signed off to close the review with what we have, because that was the process we were following at the time. If you are not getting all the information and you have been chasing, the instruction was you complete the review with what you have, and we close the job with the decision, obviously, of what the information gives you.
I see. And was there a conversation or a meeting about what information you already had that would inform that decision?
I'm not sure. In my case, in this case, I would have looked through the report itself, the review report, and made conclusions based on that.
You wouldn't, and do I understand correctly, you just looked at the review report. You wouldn't look at everything that Valentina Amoroso had managed to gather in hand, as it were?
The review report feeds from what information the project manager would have reviewed.
I see. Was this a positive decision, or was it something that just kind of occurred naturally when you received the review report? As in, what I'm getting at was there a discussion in which Valentina Amoroso said, hello, I've got all of these documents. I don't really know what to do. They're not responding. Can we have a decision to carry on? Or was it perhaps more like Valentina understood that she could just go ahead, provide you with the review report, and it was BBA process that would be enough?
I think it would have been, both cases you have outlined there. As I said, we were allowed to complete reviews with whatever information we had on file ultimately. And also, probably Valentina would have discussed also with me, or alerted me to the fact that she has this review that she hadn't managed to progress in terms of the information. I think she would have discussed with me.
I see. You don't have any positive recollection of a discussion about this review?
No, not a positive recollection, no.
I see. Am I right to understand, therefore, that the documents in hand would have been the original assessment file, S341014, the 2011 review, and whatever else Ms. Amoroso could get from the internet?
Yes, that would have been the case, yes.
There wouldn't have been any other documents that I've missed there?
Unless they did send something. I don't know whether they completely sent nothing. Okay. I don't remember that, but whatever they would have sent, we would have gone ahead with that to make a conclusion and complete the review.
Well, on the basis that Arconic indeed sent nothing except for the agreed quality plan, what the BBA did not have specifically was written confirmation that there have been no changes in the design specification, context of use, or other details that would invalidate the certificate. I'm right on that, aren't I?
Sorry, I missed that. You are right in what?
You did not have what was in paragraph 2 of that letter, written confirmation that there have been no changes. That's what you could never get from an internet search.
That's correct.
And nothing she did have would be a substitute for that kind of information. Do you accept that?
That's correct.
Can we please go to your witness statement at page 7, paragraph 20? And you can see that we've asked, what would you expect the project manager to make of the technical dossier that is compiled at issue, which is that original assessment file, S3-41014. And your answer is this: together with the contents of the certificate, the PM should check the data/information in it is still relevant. And my question is, in checking the data or information on the certificate is still relevant, would you have expected Ms. Amoroso to have done an internet search of the CSTB's website to check the fire performance statements on the certificate and that they were still correct?
No, we
Why
don't.
not? Sorry.
As part of reviews, we don't get reports from websites, test reports that is, and normally reviews don't involve looking at test reports. It's a review of the certificate itself, the technical literature, and as I said, looking at a surveillance as well, not test reports, which would have been looked at during the original assessment itself.
I see. You say in your witness statement, though, that the PM should check the data/information in it is still relevant. Are you saying that you wouldn't check the fire performance data even by looking at the CSTB website?
We wouldn't look for reports on the CSTB website. It's not common practice.
I see. Would you have expected Ms. Amoroso to contact the CSTB in another way to check that the data was still up to date?
I think with confirmation certificates, we would ask the certificate holder if they can get a confirmation from the other certification body to confirm to us that there's been no change in the product.
I see. That wasn't in the letters that were sent. Are you telling me that when they sent written confirmation, it could be from Arconic or from the CSTB, or it was supposed to be from the CSTB?
Ordinarily, with confirmation certificates, we will be asking it from the certification body, so which would have been the CSTB.
I see. And that is in the particular instance of this certificate being a confirmation certificate?
Confirmation, yes.
I see. Now, in this case, it was the BBA's standard request to ask for written confirmation. And we saw that you told Arconic that they had to provide this information. Can you explain why the decision to go only with the documents in hand was made?
As I said, that was BBA process. If you are not receiving the information, you conclude the review with what you have and then make a conclusion based on that information.
I see. So is that a convenient moment?
Yes, it suits you, does it, Ms. Hines?
It does. Thank you, sir.
Right. Well, as I said, Mr. Nkomo, we will have a break during the morning, and now we're going to take it. So
Okay.
we'll stop now. We'll resume at 11:30, please. And I must ask you, while we're on the break, please don't speak to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it.
Okay.
Right. Thank you very much. 11:30 then, please. Welcome back, everyone. We're now ready to continue taking evidence from Mr. Nkomo. Just check that he's there and can see me and hear me. Is that the case, Mr. Nkomo?
That's the case, yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, then, when you're ready, Ms. Hines, you carry on.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Nkomo, can you hear and see me?
I can, yes.
Thank you. In your evidence earlier, you said, I don't think we need to turn it up, but we can if you need. You said, in this case, I would have signed off to close the review with what we have, because that was the process we were following at the time. If we are not getting all the information and we have been chasing, the instruction was you complete the review with what you have, and we close the job with the decision, obviously, of what the information gives you. And I'm really interested in the words, the instruction you had. Was it an instruction, an official, in the sense of an official policy of the BBA to close a review with what information you had?
Yeah, I don't know whether officially, but that was the process we would follow.
I see. And was that for all certificates? You just had a general?
It was a general process.
And was that general process understood at the levels above you, so the head of approvals?
I think it would have come from above.
I see. And in coming from above, what I'm really asking is, was this the way the BBA worked officially?
I would say so. As I said, you would close, obviously, then the decision is based on the information you already have, then a decision is made on the validity of that certificate.
Yes, in fact, I'll come to that exact point in just 1 minute. I'm just trying to understand your use of the word, you had an instruction. Did somebody instruct you, or did you come to understand that there was a general instruction within the BBA that you would close a review if a certificate holder wasn't providing information?
I'd come to understand that was the general approach.
And would this have been written down anywhere?
I've never seen it written down.
I see. Would you expect it to have been written down?
A lot of what we do is based on written down procedures. This one, I've never seen it written down.
I see. And you've mentioned this closing the review and then making a decision. I just want to understand, is that effectively a two-stage process? You would make a decision to close the review, then look at what you had, and then make some decision about the validity or any other action that needs to be taken. Have I understood that correctly?
No, you actually, at the closing of the review, at the signing off of the review letter, that decision is made at that point, not after.
I see. So there's not, let me see if I understand it. You have all of the information, you gather it into a review report or checklist, depending on which methodology you're using at the time. And gathering all of that information, you then make a decision as part of that signing off process.
Correct.
I see. I want to just turn to the decision in this case, which we were talking about before the break. We heard from Ms. Amoroso that the review was in fact supposed to have been completed by June 2014. And as at the end of January 2015, when Ms. Amoroso sends her letter about having the documents in hands, by that time, this review was more than 6 months overdue. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, by those timeframes you gave, yes, it would have been.
Was that an unusual period to be overdue by?
Some reviews did tend to become overdue, to go beyond the 6 months. I don't know the proportion of those that will go to being 6 months overdue. I wouldn't have that data.
Well, looking at it now, does it strike you as quite a lengthy period of being overdue?
It is a lengthy period, yes.
Would the fact that it being this lengthy period overdue, would that have any bearing on the decision to go with the documents that you already had?
At that time, I would say so.
Ms. Amoroso told us about there being some pressure to close the reviews by the end of the financial year, which was March. Was that your understanding?
Because there had been a lot of reviews that were falling behind, becoming overdue, with the project managers, I think, busy with other assessment work. So the company compiled a list of reviews, which is what this one was part of, a list of those reviews that were already either overdue or coming to be overdue. And that during that time frame that we're referring to, the January end of 2014, beginning of 2015, the teams were specifically doing the project of focusing on reviews that were getting overdue.
I see. And I think it's your evidence that this review was in fact on that list.
If it was overdue, then it should have been on that list.
I see, I see. Who would have compiled that list?
I think it would have come either from head of approval or from and then cascaded down to team managers.
I see.
Yeah.
Was there therefore quite a big push to get all of these reviews closed off in a timely manner?
Yes, in terms of resources, as I said, then PMs were asked to focus on those reviews to complete them. As I said, from a resource point of view, because a lot of them were falling behind because project managers were dealing with a lot of the assessment work that was in hand. So now we were asked to focus on finishing those reviews.
So take project manager resource from assessment work and put it back on review work to get this set of reviews finished.
Yeah, right. Essentially, yes, focusing more on those reviews.
It was basically, there was a backlog.
Yeah, there was. That's why the list was compiled.
I see. And was there, with this list, was there a time period by which these reviews needed to be finished by?
I can't quite remember, but I'm pretty certain there was a time frame that was given.
Did that factor into the decision to close this review without the information from Arconic?
From my point of view, no, because the information hadn't been provided. And Maria had chased, Valentina had chased, and I wasn't sure whether continuing to chase will eventually get the information. As I said, the process was you complete the review with whatever information you already had in hand if you're not getting any more from the client.
Yes, my question really is the decision to focus on closing the backlog. Was that any part of the decision to just take what Arconic, what Ms. Amoroso could find on the internet as being the information from Arconic? Was that a reason to close this review?
I don't think so, because that process that I talked about earlier on of completing a review with the information that you had, it was there even long before that, as far as I understand.
I see.
Yes.
I see. Can we go to BBA 408073? And we'll see an email from you to Ms. Amoroso on the 10th of April 2015. The subject line is S1 53729. And we recognize that as the project number for this review. And you say, Valentina, find attached the above review report with my comments. I've tracked the changes so you can just accept if you agree, and the report will be as good as finished. I had a few questions on the surveillance visit table as shown. I will have all your 6 reports commented on by Monday, so we have them closed by Friday at the latest. I hate losing to the other teams, and the other teams are creeping up the closed review leaderboard, as can be seen on the board behind Rakesh, 2 exclamation marks. Once you have the report ready, bring me hard copies of both the report and the request log for sign-off. Now, is Rakesh, we see mentioned there, is he a team manager for another team?
Yes, he was a team manager for another team.
Which team?
It was a building systems team.
I see.
And including cladding as well. At the time, some people in cladding were under another team manager and some were under Rakesh.
I see. And was there a physical leaderboard hanging in the office showing the number of completed reviews per team?
Yeah, I think we had not a list, but number, just say, okay, we have 2 closed, we have 3 closed, we have 4 closed, not the actual list.
I see, but there was a tally, perhaps.
Yes, correct.
I see. Was there some internal rivalry as to which team could finish the most reviews?
I wouldn't call it rivalry, no.
What would you call it?
We're focusing resources on completing reviews that were outstanding.
But
that's what it was.
You expressly say there, I hate losing, and the other teams are creeping up the closed reviews leaderboard. Was that not perhaps light-hearted, but was that not at least some sort of competition going on?
I wouldn't call it competition. I think we're motivating ourselves to focus on this work to finish the reviews, which had been, which had lagged behind in being completed.
And part of that motivation was keeping a score.
Yeah, it was.
Were you incentivized to have a certain number of reviews closed?
You mean from management?
Yeah, from management.
No, there was no incentive.
Did you have a deadline with management though?
I believe there was a deadline for completing the whole project of completing the list of reviews. I believe there was one.
Yeah. Do you remember when that deadline was?
No, I don't remember.
I see. Were the BBA project managers aware of that deadline?
I think they would have been aware.
Were they in some way incentivized to close these reviews?
Not according to my knowledge.
Was this, as you put it, motivation, was this a factor in the decision to close the review of the Rayner Bond certificate?
No, it wasn't the motivation. The reason for closing the Rayner Bond was that was all the information that we had, and we followed what we had been made to understand. If a client is still not providing all the information, you complete the review with what you have, and then a decision is made at the completion of that review.
I see, but I still want to ask, do you think that this leaderboard, that this motivation, that these deadlines might have put some pressure on project managers to close reviews without full investigation?
I don't think so.
Okay. We can see in that email that we were just looking at that the process was to issue a review report. Can we just see what you have to say about that in your witness statement at page 10? That's BBA 30010783. Now, near the top, you can see a header saying review S153729. And at the bottom, below where the screen is, there's a question in bold at B. Thank you. It says, we've asked about your knowledge of what documents / information / assurances were requested from the certificate holder and what was received. And your answer is at paragraph 33. Other than the information that was referenced in the review report, I don't know the rest of what was requested specifically. There is generally a standard list of information that is requested for all reviews. When checking the report, I asked about the availability of tolerances information due to the nature of the statement in the report, which the PM confirmed in the final report that it had been received. I don't specifically know what was received as far as the rest of the review is concerned. Now, Mr. Nkomo, can we take from that you did not check everything that Valentina Amoroso looked at for this review?
Yes, that's correct.
Would it have been wise to check what she'd done, given she was still, I think, relatively new at the BBA?
I think the review itself, if you look through it, the review itself that she had prepared outlined her findings from looking at the information that she had in hand, whether it from their website or not. To me, her opinions of that information was clear from the review report.
And would you take her opinions as expressed on the review report, and would you investigate those, or did you just trust that those opinions were correct?
I'm not entirely sure. I did comment on the report itself. I believe I made a few comments on the report.
Sorry, Mr. Nkomo, carry on.
No, I was saying I made a few comments as part of that checking process.
Yes, well, we can see in your witness statement, you said that you commented on the availability of tolerances information. But do I understand you just took her opinion on the rest of it as it was set out in the review?
Yes, because to me, it was clearly laid out in the review report.
Well, should we take a quick look at the review report? It's BBA 408072. And we can see at the bottom there that it's dated 10th of April 2015. And is it right, this is your signature?
That's correct.
And in this report, you can take it from me, she doesn't mention anything about checking fire, and she doesn't mention anything about not having received any written confirmation, whether it be as part of this being a confirmation certificate or otherwise. Now, would you have noticed that at the time?
Regarding fire, no, because there is no expectation when we are carrying out reviews to look at test reports.
I see.
Yeah.
And there's no mention of not having received any written confirmation.
Yeah, with the confirmation is the way the report template is laid out. I think it's not obviously clear that someone can populate it with that information to the effect that they haven't received the confirmation.
Would that how should I put it, insight that you had not received that confirmation, would that have been recorded in any other document?
I'm not sure, because the basically the two documents that form the review, sorry, in this case at that time it was the review report was the document that basically contained the findings of the review. So if it wasn't mentioned here, I don't expect it would have been mentioned elsewhere other than on emails where a project manager did not get any response from the certificate holder.
Does that mean there wasn't any BBA record that Arconic had failed to provide this information that was requested?
I think other than from emails, I don't think there was any other record.
Well, the next person coming to do the next review, let's say Ms. Amoroso moves to another role, she leaves the BBA, and let's say that you, as we know, you did become a cladding expert, you're not so directly involved in all of this process. The next person that comes to review this certificate, how would they know of the long history of Arconic failing to provide information if it's not in this review report?
I think they may not, at least at that time, they may not know. I mean, since then, the review process is kind of evolved with the new checklist. One of the sections specifically asks that question: has the certificate holder responded appropriately to all the questions and provided all the confirmations? And there's also a certificate log where if a project manager working on a certificate now comes across any aspect that needs to be recorded, they will go on that certificate log, which every other manager, whenever it's your turn to work on the certificate, you would go there, you would have a bit of history.
So when did that process change?
I believe it changed in 2015, I think, the early part of 2015. That's when we started using the review checklist.
I see. So yes, I see. And we'll see a review checklist later today. In the case that you were not using the review checklist, as in this review, you were using the review report, was that a weakness in the BBA procedure?
I would say it certainly didn't provide in terms of continuity of knowledge about that certificate if someone else came along who wasn't familiar with the previous work.
I see.
Just to correct something, not correct, just to clarify something as well, with the review checklist, when it was introduced in I believe early 2015, it didn't have that section, about confirmation by the PM to say, can you confirm that the certificate holder has provided all the necessary responses appropriately. I believe that aspect was added to the checklist probably in 2019, I believe.
So really quite recently.
Or 2018 or 2019, thereabout.
I see.
Yeah.
And we saw that you signed the report, and really just to close this part of the topic off, you've accepted responsibility for the contents of that report. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, can we go to your witness statement at page 6, please? Paragraph 17. And we see we've asked you about suspension. A certificate could be suspended in situations where the certificate holder is no longer meeting the conditions of certification and have not rectified the situation in a timely manner. Given the volume of correspondence from the BBA with no helpful answer from Arconic whatsoever, and given the amount of time that had passed dealing with Arconic, and given that the fact was that this review was months overdue, should the certificate have been suspended?
Possibly.
Was suspension ever discussed with you?
I don't recall a discussion regarding a suspension of the certificate.
Was suspension considered?
I don't recall.
Now, I've understood that it was in fact the BBA process to carry on with these documents, to close the review, carry on with what you had. Is that a weakness in the BBA process?
I'll probably say so. But the new process, I think, that has come in, kind of addresses that. As I said, the new checklist specifically has that section being asked directly.
I see. Changing the subject slightly, I want to ask you about cladding fires around the world. And when you made your witness statement, we asked you about what you knew about the Lacrosse fire, the Torch fire, and the Address fire. And they happened between November 2014 and December 2015. Do you recall those fires?
Yeah, I remember, yes, talk about the fires.
You talked about the fires. Who did you talk with about the fires?
Oh no, I remember the talk about the fires at the time. It's something that I think was, when they happened, people were talking about it in the engineering department.
I see, so other project managers, other team managers perhaps?
I don't know about team managers. I believe someone had forwarded a video. I think there was a video of it soon after it happened. I think that's how come people started talking about it.
I see. Were you aware of, I'm just going to tell you about two more fires. Were you aware of the Tamwil fire in the UAE in November 2012, or the Al Hafit fire in the UAE in April 2013?
I don't remember.
So what I'm really asking is slightly earlier than the period 2014, so earlier fires from
I don't remember. I don't remember.
Did knowing about these fires perhaps indicate that care should be taken to check the fire performance in BBA certificates?
I don't know about checking fire performance in the existing certificates as such, because the certificates themselves, once they are done, they go through layers of checking. Like they'll go through a team manager checking, a head of approvals checking, and at the moment they'll go through the technical excellence team checking. So I wouldn't have imagined that then we would go back to check the fire reports on all the certificates at that time.
I see. So even though there were international cladding fires, you didn't therefore pay more attention to the claimed fire performance on the certificates. Is that right?
Me specifically, I don't know. I'm not speaking. I can't speak for everyone at the BBA. I'm saying myself, I didn't necessarily go into the files to think I need to scrutinize, the fire data that was on the files.
You told us earlier, and you are now a technical expert in external facades. I think, forgive me if I've got the title exactly wrong, but you're not yourself very expert in fire. Have I understood that?
That's correct. That's
and
correct.
To be a technical expert in external cladding, what expertise do you bring?
It's a general assessment of wall cladding. I mean, a lot of the technical aspects regarding the assessment itself. Then obviously there are specialized aspects, i.e. fire is one of them. And I said, something where we have people who understand fire more within the BBA, and naturally, if there are queries, we would go to those people. Or aspects like durability, if there are issues or queries with them, we'll go to our construction products department. So as a technical expert, you are not expected to be an expert in all aspects. Of course, neither can you be.
I see. And your background is structural, I've understood. Is that right?
Structural, correct, yes.
Is that where your expertise lies in cladding, would you say?
Yes, I would say it's not just structural, but I think an appreciation of a holistic approach to assessment. I mean, assessment of cladding itself is more than just the structural aspect. I think there are many nuances to it.
I see. I'm turning to a new topic. I'm turning to the reissue contract in 2015. And for your reference, the number is S1-57262. My understanding is the 2015 review concluded that Arconic had to take up a reissue contract. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Can we go to Claude Verler's exhibit, part 18, at page 41, please? That's MET 3053, here it goes, 158, part 18, page 41. We see here a reissue contract, number S157262, and it's dated the 1st of May. And we see that at the top. If we scroll to the bottom, we can see that Claude Verler signed this on the 5th of May, 2015. And if we go up to page 38 in this exhibit, we can see at the very top that Mr. Verler has sent this to Mr. Dicker at the BBA. And he says, "Hi, Gary, please find enclosed the signed reissue certificate contract for Rainabond." Now, you, and not just you, every BBA witness who we've asked about this has said that the certificate holder did not take up or sign the contract. But what we see here is that Arconic did in fact agree to enter a contract to reissue the Rainabond certificate. Can you account for why the BBA thought the contract was not signed?
No, I can't. When contracts go out and they are signed first, and then they are paid for, and then an instruction is then given to us in the technical department to say you can start the work. I don't recall we receiving any instruction to the effect that the job is now valid, as we call it. It's a combination of the contract being signed plus it being paid for. So I can't account for why then it didn't go the extra step of being paid for and then made valid.
I see. You say in your witness statement that it wasn't signed, though. Does that mean that somehow the signed contract was missed?
As far as I know, I've never actually seen a signed version. That's why I assumed it was never signed. That's why the job was abandoned.
I see. Was it your department that was responsible for monitoring this?
No, the department will prepare the contracts themselves from a technical point in terms of what work is required. And the contracts then are passed on to our commercial team. And the next that we would really get involved is when a contract has been signed and paid for, and authority has been given for us as technical people to start work. So it was the commercial team who chased contracts.
I see. I'm turning now to talk about the third review of this certificate, which started on the 12th of October. And again, for your reference, 0286. And by the 12th of October, I've understood that you've moved into a dual role. You were the team manager, but also technical expert from a few weeks previously. So you're new in that dual role. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Did being technical expert have any impact on the amount of time you were able to devote to being a team manager?
Over time, yes, it did.
Did you still have the same number of project managers to manage?
I can't quite remember the exact numbers, I think, because they were quite numerous departures and new people coming in. So I would say roughly, that's probably correct, roughly.
I see. And you said that over time, being technical expert had an impact on the amount of time you were able to devote to being team manager. Can you explain what you mean by that? Do you mean that at the beginning it was okay and you could manage all the project managers you had, but at some later date, the burden of being technical got greater?
Yes, because I think there were quite, as I said, there were quite numerous departures and incomings in the cladding team. And there was a lot of, I think, support required of those. So as time went on, more and more, I had a lot of technical support and guidance and mentoring to do.
I see.
Yes.
At this time, and I'm talking about October 2016, you were still the team manager for Valentina Amoroso, weren't you?
Correct.
Can we please go to BBA 3011059? We're going to see correspondence with Arconic in October 2016. Can we please go to page 4? This is an email we see at the top, dated the 12th of October 2016, timed at 17:09. And she says, "Dear Claude Verla," down to the first substantive paragraph, "I've been designated as the project manager responsible for coordinating the review of your BBA certificate 084510, and your name has been advised to me as our main liaison contact for this work. Our estimated time for the completion of this project is approximately 4 months, and to initiate the work required for this review within that period, we require the following information to be provided to the BBA by Alcoa Architectural Products. 1, written confirmation from Alcoa Architectural Products that there have been no changes to the raw materials, manufacturing processes, or quality control procedure other than those already notified to the BBA. 2, a copy of the current UK technical literature, CE marking if applicable, and installation instructions relating to the certificated product. 3, a list of customer complaints, if any, relating to product quality for the projects in the UK and the action taken to resolve them. 4, recent copies of completed quality control sheets for the manufacturer of the product. Now that's a much shorter list than we saw in the 2013-2015 review, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And was that the practice to send that shorter list at that time?
I'm not sure whether at the time, as I said earlier on in the hearing, I think there used to be a pool of, in terms of information that would be requested. It depends on which reference point a project manager was using. You could have two jobs that have, as we can see here, one having this list, another one having a previous list.
So was it up to the project manager to select what information they would request from the certificate holder?
It's not necessarily a question of which information for them to select. I think there was basically a full list of what we requested from clients. I think it just depended on which reference point or which job a project manager was referring to for that information. One may not realize that one list was shorter than the other because of the job that they are using as a reference point for going forward.
Well, this is a review, and we've got the same project manager who would have had access to what had been asked of Arconic in the past, mostly because she asked it. And here we have a much shorter list. Was it a matter of her judgment what she would ask from Arconic?
I think it's not a matter of judgment. I think it's a matter of generally, as I said, there were kind of defined list of information that we would ask. It's not a question of you going in and saying, okay, I won't ask for this, I won't ask for this, I will choose this one. So
sorry, carry on.
No, I think, as I said, it's a question, I think it's a question of which reference point a project manager used. Because some jobs may have had this list. It is possible this list was taken from a previous job that had only these four compared to maybe the slightly longer list that we looked at previously.
When you say reference point, I'm not sure I quite understand. Do you mean perhaps that Ms. Amoroso was working on another job where she used this short list and she took that as a reference point and that then became the list to ask Arconic? Or
Yeah,
is that all wrong?
That's what I'm saying. That may have been the case here. I don't think she went through a list and said, no, I would exclude this or include this. I think this may have been a list from a previous request we sent somewhere else.
Well, was that right of her to do that, to take a short list from another job and to send that to Arconic? Was that an acceptable thing for her to do?
I don't know if she realized it was a shorter list. I don't know that much.
Because what we don't see in this list is that question at paragraph 2 of those previous requests that we've seen, written confirmation that there have been no changes. We don't see that anywhere in this list, do we?
No.
And so my question is, was it by this time a standard or a habit or a practice to not ask for that written confirmation that there have been no changes in the design specification, context of use, or other details that would invalidate the certificate?
I'm not aware that it was now the new standard.
I see. We saw in the evidence of Ms. Amoroso that she never did ask for that confirmation and Arconic never provided it. Was it acceptable for Arconic to never provide that written confirmation by this time?
I think by the time of this review, we may not have realized that the confirmation that was included in the previous review still hadn't been provided.
I see.
Because we would do this review then based on generally on this list that we had sent out. Unless someone realized that, or the list realized during the course of the review that the new list is now shorter than the original, we would have progressed on the assumption that what we have asked for here is what we required to complete the review.
I see. So it relied on someone noticing?
I would say so, yes.
Now, in this case, doesn't that mean that you were just not getting that important confirmation from the certificate holder?
I think that's what it would mean here.
Can we go to the checklist for this review? You've spoken of this checklist, and it's at BBA 3011085. And by this time, this was the method for signing off reviews, well and truly, if it began in sometime in 2015. I've understood that correctly, haven't I?
Correct.
And we see at the top there, I think, is that your signature?
It is, yes.
And your initials PN and the date 15th of November 2016, is that right?
That's correct.
Can we go to page 4, please? And at the top, we see section 12. Certificate check data, and it says, are data still relevant, calculation or test methods up to date, not in conflict with a harmonized standard, still meet required performance, etc. Can you tell us what was the project manager supposed to look at for that task?
I think here you check these standards that are listed in that particular certificate, and number one, to see whether they are still up to date. Like, has the standard been revised? It could have been a 2010 standard, but has it been replaced, let's say, by a 2015 standard? So you check all the standard references that they are up to date. And as the checklist says, they are all data still relevant as well. So when you go through the certificate, is the data that's there in the certificate is still relevant? Is it still up to date?
Well, just about that, is data still relevant? Would you have expected the project manager, as part of this checklist, to check that the data pertinent to fire performance was still relevant?
Not necessarily the fire data, because how we'll do it, while you are going through all the technical literature and product brochures that you have received from the client, you'll cross-check that whatever they are claiming in their brochures, is it consistent with what's in the certificate, or is it consistent with what's in the file? Because sometimes some data may have been assessed, but it's not necessarily the case that all data is then put forward in the public document of the file, so of the certificate itself.
And specifically, in this review, we understand that the fire test data itself was not checked. Was that in line with the BBA standard process at the time?
I wouldn't have expected the fire data to be specifically checked itself. As I explained, the way, if the technical literature or the brochures themselves are claiming values that are different to what's in the certificate or what's in the file, if there's a claim in the brochures, you'd go and check with the certificate, is it similar? If it's not in the certificate, you'd go and check in the file, is it similar?
But it's the nature of a marketing brochure, isn't it, to not set out all of the test data, particularly if some of that test data is unattractive. That's right, isn't it?
I can't speak for certificate holders and how they do brochures, really.
Well, what I'm getting at is, if you don't go and check with the certificate holder that the test data is up to date, the BBA would be at risk of meeting new fire test data, wouldn't it?
I believe as part of certification, the conditions of certification, certificate holders are required to inform the BBA should there be any change to their product anyway as part of the terms and conditions.
I see. Can we look now at section 13, the certificate check wording? And can we look particularly at that long paragraph, the third paragraph down? And bear with me, see, it is a long one. Ms. Amoroso wrote, a general rewording is necessary as the certificate has never been reissued since its first issue in 2008. The only reissue job ever raised, S157262 in 2015, was never taken up and then abandoned. Particularly since the product has a reaction to fire classification of B, heightened boundary restrictions apply, and section 6 needs to be consistently revised in accordance with our latest templates. Also, the client has confirmed in email dated 26th of October 2016 that they don't manufacture the cassette, so the description part of the certificate needs to be revised to make clear that the client is only manufacturing flat sheets and that the use as a cassette is outside scope. She goes on, and if we can just drop down to where she goes, she picks it up at 9.1, which is some 7 lines from the bottom. She says also 9.1. Have you got that, Mr. Nkomo?
Yes.
Also 9.1 needs to be revised as it is not appropriate to give a service life of 30 years based on historical evidences. A thorough investigation in the initial assessment folder file S341014084510 has revealed that no tests were actually assessed for the panel. The durability statement was issued on the basis of the CSTB approval and some tests data carried out of the AL coated sheet. So dealing with that in reverse order, really, you saw there that she said a thorough investigation of the initial assessment folder file. And that number she gives there, S341014, that's the assessment conducted by Hamo Gregorian. Now, when Ms. Amoroso did this thorough assessment of that file, would you expected her to have looked at all of the data in that file?
Not necessarily all the data. As I think, as you can see here, the reason she went to the original certificate file was when she read, obviously, the statement in the certificate that the durability was based on historical evidence. So she specifically went in looking at durability data, which is what we will do if I spotted something that raises questions in my head, then I would then go into the actual original certification file.
And if you had that question about durability, am I right, you would be looking at just the records of the assessment on durability? You wouldn't expand that to look at the rest of the data, other issues, for example, fire?
I wouldn't expect, yes, here to be looking at everything else then under that folder.
We see in this section 13 that Ms. Amoroso proposed 2 specific changes. She said references to the cassette variant were to be removed and a height restriction was to be added. I want to talk first about removing the references to the cassette variation. Do you know what I mean by removing those references in that certificate?
I do, yes.
Was that removal of those references because readers might think that the certificate covered cassette?
Yes.
But the technical performances claimed in the certificate would apply equally to rivet and cassette. Was that your understanding of how a reader might read that?
Yes, but more specifically, this particular aspect was as a result of the BBA discovering that there were no factory surveillance visits taking place to the companies that actually manufactured cassettes. It was based on that one aspect of surveillance, no surveillance. And the certificate holder specifically had said they bore no responsibility for the cassettes. That was the reason.
Yes, yes. But up until that point, a reader of the BBA certificate for Bond might think that the fire performance, for example, for cassette would apply to cassette just as much as it would apply to rivet. And that was the problem. Am I right on that?
Yes, I think the reader would assume the information that's in the certificate was applicable to both, unless otherwise stated in the certificate which format it applied to.
And what Ms. Amoroso discovered was that that couldn't be relied on. Am I right on that?
Based on the fact that there was no surveillance. It was purely a surveillance concern, lack of surveillance concern.
And if the reader did rely on that certificate for cassette, the reader would be wrong. Yes?
Sorry, could you repeat the question again?
If the reader had this certificate and it said, and they understood from it that they could put a cassette form on their building, and all of the technical performances that were stated in the certificate, they could take all of those technical performances and say, yes, they definitely apply to cassette because the BBA certificate says they do, or I've understood from the BBA certificate that those technical performances will apply. The reader that does that could be making a mistake.
Yes, that's correct, unless the technical information that they were specifically reading about was clarifying that we're talking is relating to a flat sheet alone or a cassette. If it wasn't specific which format a reader could
And really
interpret this as applying to everything.
I see. And that was really the problem, because the certificate didn't distinguish between cassette and rivet. Do you accept that?
So what do you mean by cassette and rivet? What do you mean by rivet?
The cassette fabrication and the rivet fabrication aren't set out differently.
Okay.
So a reader wouldn't understand there to be any distinction.
Yes.
And having made this discovery, or come to this conclusion, the BBA certificate would actually have something that was wrong on it. Do you see that? Do you accept that?
Yes.
So changing the certificate to no longer refer to the cassette variant, was that not an urgent change?
It was a necessary change. I don't know whether I would characterize it as urgent. As I said, when going through this, the reason why the decision to remove the cassettes was based on the aspect of no surveillance. I don't think myself, I thought beyond, at the time, I thought beyond surveillance.
Was this a case where the certificate might have been suspended?
I don't know whether immediately or after, an attempt to have it revised quickly. I wouldn't know in terms of timeframes. I don't have a time frame in my head.
Are you aware of any consideration given to suspending the certificate?
At the time, I don't believe I was aware of consideration to suspend. I don't recall.
I see. am I right that no information about this change would have been published on the BBA website at the time?
I don't think we have a mechanism on the website to inform what certificate is being revised or changed. I don't believe there is a mechanism, as far as I know.
I see. Now, we saw in the review checklist at section 13 a moment ago that there was to be a new statement added to certificates with regards to a height restriction, and Ms. Amoroso referred to that as being the latest templates. Do you recall that wording?
Yes, I believe so.
Would you like to see it again?
No, I remember that.
Very well.
Yeah.
Does that reference to latest templates, does that mean that this was standard wording?
I think there was a way of presenting the fire data, which was basically stating what the reaction to fire was of a product. And then what Valentina is referring to now with the latest templates, it was now to go further than that and actually put the interpretation of what the reaction to fire means in terms of any height or boundary restrictions.
Well, let's have a look at an example of that in the BBA certificate for Rainer Bond at BBA 6046. This was the certificate as issued on the 4th of August 2017. First of all, do you recognize this certificate?
Yes.
And we know it's the later one because you can see at the top right, there's a different building in there, isn't there?
That's correct.
It's shorter, isn't it?
Yes.
And we can see at the bottom, date of issue. It says 4th of August 2017. So we know that that's the date of this certificate. Can we now go to page 7? And section 7.3. And it says, the products are not classified as being non-combustible or of limited combustibility, non-combustible in Scotland. And so their use is restricted to 18 meters in height, unless a full-scale fire test to either BS 84141, 2015, or BS 84142, 2015, has been conducted for the specific wall construction under consideration and the other requirements of BRE report BR 135, 2013 have been met. Now, is that the standard template wording?
I don't know whether it is word for word, but in terms of the including the height and the boundary restrictions, I would say yes.
And I understand that what this statement is really saying is that unless a product was of limited combustibility or better, non-combustible, it couldn't be used over 18 meters. Is that your understanding?
According to that statement, I would say so, yes.
What do you understand limited combustibility to mean?
As I said, I'm not really an expert on fire, but in general, I think limited combustibility will be a reaction to fire of a class A2 other than A2S1D not.
Yes, so if one looks at the European classifications, in approved document B, limited combustibility is A2 or better, really. I can hear Dr. Lane already screaming that I've got that slightly wrong. It's A2, and non-combustibility would be A1. Or you could follow the British standard BS 476 part 11. Does that ring any bells with you?
Vaguely, as I said, I'm not really fire wasn't my, or rather fire is not my area of expertise.
So am I right that, was there an instruction to add this statement to the relevant certificates for ACM? Have I got that right?
Not at pre-Grenfell fire. I think there was no instruction to add to ACMs. I think what we were doing at the time is to add any applicable height and boundary restrictions based on the reaction to fire, whatever the certificate was, not necessarily that it was ACM.
I see. So
after Grenfell, that we then, the company, rather than looked at all, say, ACM certificates in one go.
I see. So it was any product that might come into the rules about height restrictions, and the BBA was looking to add this wording. Have I got that right?
As far as I understand, yes.
Who would have made the decision whether it was appropriate to add this wording?
I don't recall. I think there were numerous discussions that had been going on over a long period of time. So I don't recall specifically who would have made that final decision.
So I'm really asking at the moment about, would a project manager on a case-by-case basis, say pre-fire, a case-by-case basis, look at the product and make a decision based on their understanding of approved document B and the building regulations, and make a decision about whether the height restriction had to go on? Is that how, before the Grenfell fire, was that how the decision was made to add the height restriction?
It wasn't on an individual PM basis. I think there was an understanding at the time that for certain reaction to fires, height and boundary restrictions were to be considered. So whenever a certificate came up for, let's say, a review or a reissue, and the project manager, spotted that there were no height or boundary aspects included, then they'll flag that up to be considered at the next reissue.
I see. And were they given some training as to when it would be appropriate to add this height or boundary restriction?
I don't recall specifically at that time, but as I said earlier on in the hearing, numerous seminars have been held internally or given internal by the technical excellence team, and some of them have focused on what will constitute height and boundary restrictions being applicable. But in terms of time frame, I don't know whether any of it was at that time. I can't say.
I see. You've said, I think, that you yourself don't have and do correct me if I'm wrong on this, you yourself don't have a very precise understanding of the definition of limited combustibility and perhaps when the height restriction should come on. My question is, how did a project manager know that they should consider putting this height restriction on?
Template statements are prepared by the technical excellence team that would identify to say, if the reaction to fire is this, then these are the sort of statements that we should be putting in, and some of those then would refer to the height and boundary. So there were template statements that were made that would guide a project manager. Whether it was there at that time precisely or not, I can't quite remember.
I see. And did the technical excellence team write these templates?
Yes.
I see. Now, you touched on this before, I think. My question now is, how was the decision made? Was this decision made by the technical excellence team, by someone else?
Sorry, which decision?
The decision that height restrictions would be considered for any product which comprises part of an external facade.
ultimately it was the technical excellence team, hence them preparing this guidance documents and standard statements for all project managers to refer to.
Now, during this 2016 review, was it mandatory? Sorry, not during this review. Let me take a different point. At the beginning of 2017, before the fire, was it mandatory for product manufacturers to have the height restriction added to their certificate?
I don't know if it was mandatory, but it's something that we're beginning to do. I think there'd been already certificates that had been revised for height restrictions whenever they came up for review. So I can't say whether it was mandatory.
So it wouldn't automatically trigger a reissue. This decision that height restrictions should be considered didn't mean that all of the certificates that needed a height restriction would have to be reissued immediately. It was more of an as and when they came up for reissue, it would be added. Am I right?
That's correct, yes.
Now, we spoke earlier about cladding fires in 2014 and 15. Can we look at your witness statement now at page 9? And we see at the bottom at question D, you see at the top, sorry, to the operator, you can see at the top, we've listed those fires, the torch, the address and the lacrosse building. And if we scroll down to the question at D, you can see we've asked if those fires was a consideration of such events part of reviewing certification. In paragraph 28, you say, yes, with respect to clarifying any applicable height restrictions. Do I understand correctly that these fires were part of the reason that the BBA added the height restriction wording?
As far as I understood it, yes, they were part of that process.
And if that's right, given that fires were known about in 2014 and 15, do you know why this clarification was not made much earlier?
I don't know.
Now, the certificate that we were looking at, the new certificate, that was reissued after the fire. We saw the date, the 4th of August, 2017. And it was reissued along with 8 other ACM certificates. And I think you touched on that in your evidence. And all of them had the height restriction warning. Was that because of some new policy that came in after the Grenfell Tower fire?
I think ACMs were already being, not just ACMs, as I said earlier, certificates were now being clarified for height and boundary restrictions before the fire. After the fire, then senior management decided, rather than amending them as and when they came up for a reissue, the BBA would amend them all at the same time.
And amend them without permission or discussing with the certificate holder. Have I got that right?
I'm not speaking to the mechanism of how it was done. I'm just speaking to the principle.
I see.
I wasn't involved in the actual conversations with the certificate holders myself.
And just as a matter of principle, did you understand it to be an urgent change?
That's how I understood it, because initially I think the company had planned to do this very quickly and all in one go.
And was that because of the fire?
I think that contributed to that, because before the fire, they were not being revised all at once. It was as and when they came. So I think it was instigated by the fire to look at them all together in one go.
I see. Mr. Nkomo, when you were team manager, you signed off the 2015 review, and you also signed off the 2016 review. And those reviews did not discover that Arconic had test reports, data, and classifications for Rainabond PE that were completely different and substantially lower than those claimed on the BBA certificate. By that I mean in 2011, Rainabond PE cassette was classified E. January 2014, all Rainabond PE was classified E. December 2014, Rainabond PE rivet was class CS2D0. In December 2014, Rainabond PE cassette remained class E. In September 2015, Rainabond PE rivet was classified again with a black core as CS2D0. And in September 2015, Rainabond PE cassette was still class E. At those classifications, Rainabond PE could not meet either the European classification stated in diagram 40 of approved document B, could it?
I imagine no.
And it's a matter of fact that the review process didn't uncover this information, did it?
No, it didn't.
Would you agree that the BBA's review processes had significant weaknesses?
I don't know whether it's weaknesses. In terms of the test reports, as I said, the reviews themselves don't look at test reports that were assessed at original certification. Perhaps the weaknesses, as you said, is if we had the client confirm to us if there had been any changes. So I would say from that point of view, to me, that would have been the weakness, that we never got that confirmation.
Would you agree that mistakes were made in not getting clear statements that no changes had been made and in not getting up-to-date information?
I would say so.
Mr. Chairman, I've come to the end of my prepared questions. Is it appropriate to take a short break?
Well, I think it's necessary, isn't it?
It is.
Do you think 10 minutes might be long enough?
Just look towards, yes, 10 minutes should be enough.
Yeah. Mr. Nkomo, when counsel gets to the end of her questions, we always have a short break so that she can check that nothing's been omitted, and also to enable others who are following the proceedings to put forward questions that they think we ought to ask you. So we're going to take a short break now. We'll come back and continue at 5 to 1, please, and see if there are any more questions for you. There may or may not be, I don't know. So that's what we'll do. Can I ask you, please, not to talk to anyone about your evidence during the break or anything to do with it? And we'll see you at 5 to 1.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. We'll see now if Ms. Hines had any more questions for Mr. Nkomo. Mr. Nkomo, first, are you there? Can you hear me, see me all right?
I can. Yes.
Good, thank you very much. Well, we'll see now if Ms. Hines has got any more questions for you. Yes, Ms. Hines.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Nkomo, can you see and hear me?
I can, yes.
I'm afraid I do have a few very short questions. My first is thinking back to when you were doing when you were project manager doing review work, and when you were first managing Ms. Amoroso's review, can you tell us who the fire experts were that you would refer to?
I don't quite recall at the time, but John Denya and John Orban were there since the time I joined the BBA. Now, I'm not particularly sure whether Valentina and myself were referring to them at that specific moment in time.
Were they recognized as people to go to for fire expertise at that time?
And not expertise, guidance, really.
I understand. I want to now just ask about suspension. Ms. Amoroso said in her evidence yesterday that it was common practice within the BBA that suspension of a certificate would happen when there was active denial of the certificate holder to allow factory visits. And is she right about that? Was that the BBA policy at the time?
I think she's right, yes.
And who would have decided that?
I think normally in those cases, if the project manager came across that fact that the certificate holder obviously was, as you put it, denying surveillance, then there is a form that is either a project manager will go and discuss with their team manager or the head of approvals. Or in any case, there is a form that would be required to be filled, and the project manager would need to put the reasons for the proposed suspension.
So Ms. Amoroso said that it was when there was active denial. Were there any other circumstances in which suspension would be considered?
Yes, not only surveillance. I think also it depends on a case-by-case basis. As I said, if we came across a situation where there was something that's not quite a query that I think we are looking for a response and we aren't getting that response, but that response is fundamental to our ability to decide that the certificate in its entirety is valid. I think that will be another cause, but there are numerous different reasons for suspending.
Have you ever personally raised a certificate as a candidate for suspension?
I have, yes.
And what were the circumstances of that?
I think we had reason to believe as a BBA in that case that the product that was now being sold was drastically different to what we assessed, and efforts to get the situation rectified I think hadn't progressed for quite a while.
How often would a suspension occur? Was it a relatively infrequent event? Was it something discussed more regularly?
I can't say. As I said, in my case, the one I can remember that I was involved in a suspension, I think I can remember definitely one, but it wasn't an uncommon discussion to be had to say, should we consider suspending this certificate because of ABC? It wasn't an uncommon conversation to be had with either a team manager or a head of approval who ultimately signs off on that action.
And I think it's your evidence. Can you clarify that you don't recall any conversation about suspending the Rainabond certificate, at least before the fire?
I don't specifically recall myself.
Well, sir, those are my questions. Mr. Nkomo, I just want to say thank you very much for coming and helping us today. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Nkomo, well, those are all the questions we have for you. On behalf of myself and the whole panel, I'd like to thank you very much for making yourself available to give your evidence to us. It's been very helpful to hear what you have to tell us. So we are indeed very grateful. And that's the end as far as you're concerned. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, well, we'll break now for lunch in the usual way, and we'll resume at 2:05, please. Thank you.